Government business. Order of the day number 31. Social Security Administration Amendment, Income Management and Cashless Welfare Bill 2019. Resumption of debate on the second reading.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the honourable member for Barton.
Thank you, Mr Assistant Speaker. I rise to speak to this bill. Labor has serious concerns about the cashless welfare card, and we oppose its rollout nationally. We have always opposed a national rollout of the card. Labor has always said that we will support evidence-based approaches to addressing the challenges that these local communities face, and we will do it in consultation and partnership with these local communities. This bill extends funding of the cashless debit card trial in Ceduna and East Kimberley and the Goldfields until 30 June 2020. These trial areas are currently scheduled to end in 1 July 2019. There is also a trial in Bundaberg, Hervey Bay. However, the end date for that trial is already 30 June 2020. This bill also extends the funding for the Cape York Welfare Reform Initiative until 1 July 2020. That funding currently expires on 1 July 2019. We believe that if a community wants to try something new to tackle social issues, that it is not for this parliament to stand in their way. For this reason, Labor supported the introduction of the trials in the first two trial sites, Ceduna in South Australia and the East Kimberley in Western Australia. However, Labor has not been able to satisfy ourselves through our own consultations that this same community desire was present in the other trial sites, that's the Goldfields and Bundaberg, Hervey Bay. For this reason, Labor did not support the introduction of the cashless debit card to the other trial sites. With the Prime Minister reported to have confirmed today the election could be as late as 25th of May, the timing of this bill puts the Parliament in a really difficult position. I want to stress that the timing puts us in an incredibly difficult position. Because regardless of the people's position on the cashless debit card, funding for communities is likely to run out in a matter of weeks. Without any prospect of sorting out a transition to alternative arrangements, this could be very disruptive to those locals. The government has also included the extension of the Cape York Welfare Reform Initiative in this bill, an approach that does have a level of community support, and which cannot be simply left unfunded in a matter of weeks' time. Since the introduction of the cashless debit card trials, the government has continually failed to be upfront about the full cost of implementing the cashless debit card. In addition, Labor has become increasingly concerned about the Liberals' persistent clinging to the deeply flawed ARIMA evaluation. The Prime Minister and his Conservative government have continued to use this report to sing the praises of the cashless debit card and mislead Australians about the extent to its success. Leading academics have referred to the comments made by the government as extremely misleading and perplexing. The Auditor-General found deep inconsistencies with the ARIMA evaluation. The government must stop relying on this report to justify their increasingly outlandish claims about the success of the cashless debit card trials. At a recent Senate inquiry into this bill, the committee heard evidence that in some trial sites, the way the cashless debit card has been rolled out and the period it has been in operation preclude a proper piece of evaluation of its impact. We are no longer talking about trials in some sites, but a government that is looking to entrench a policy without proving that it works. There have been now a number of inquiries into the cashless debit card scheme, and the committee has continued to hear mixed evidence about the card. Some think it has been beneficial to their communities. Others think it has made existing problems worse. Indigenous leader and Foundation Chair of the Australian Indigenous Studies at the University of Melbourne, Professor Marcia Langton has said the cashless debit card is a failure. Professor Langton said because the local community is not involved in implementing the policy failed. One of the community leaders in Kununurra who had initially supported the introduction of the trial, Mr Desmond Hill, has since withdrawn his support. Mr Hill told the committee that one of the conditions that community leaders had when agreeing to the East Kimberley becoming the trial site was that people would be able to apply to leave the trial. Another Indigenous leader in the East Kimberley, Ian Trust, who remains a supporter of the cashless debit card, told the committee that he was not opposed to people being able to come off the card in some circumstances. The government has failed to properly provide this option. People who do the right thing have been unfairly stigmatised by being forced to take part in the cashless debit card trial, which is targeting behaviours that they themselves don't engage with in the first place. Labor will move an amendment in the Senate to allow people to get off the cashless debit card in certain circumstances. The amendment would allow people to come off the card if they can demonstrate reasonable and responsible management of their financial affairs, taking into account these points, Mr Assistant Speaker: the interests of any children for which they are responsible, lawful behaviour, risk of homelessness, health and safety of the individual and the community, the responsibilities and circumstances of the participant, engagement in community job search and work. Local community panels would be responsible for approving applications for people to leave the trial, but where a panel is not in place, the Department of Social Services would make the decision. At their recent inquiry, the committee heard that from a number of witnesses about the lack of evidence supporting broad-based compulsory income management. It has been revealed that even the government itself, or at least the public service, certainly acknowledged this. Late last year, in a document presented to the United Nations Committee on the Economic, Social and Cultural Rights the Australian government wrote, "There are more positive results associated with people who volunteer, as they have made a choice to change their behaviour and receive assistance. Positive findings have been found for people who have been referred for income management by a social worker or a child protection officer." The Anti-Poverty Network of South Australia told the Senate committee about a woman who they had met in Ceduna, who used to be able to purchase things online. Because of the cashless debit card, is no longer able to do so. The network told the committee that this woman is never drunk, she never had drugs or anything like that. It's just an inhibitive way of life for her now. Why should someone who has never engaged in binge drinking or taking illicit drugs be forced onto the cashless debit card that was introduced to address these behaviours? The answer is simple, Mr Assistant Speaker, is that they should not. We call on the government to vote with us in the Senate so that people who do not need to be on the cashless debit card no longer have to be. Labor has never supported the rollout of the cashless debit card nationally. We will not proceed with the government's plan to roll out the cashless debit card and its harsh policies, including across the Northern Territory. I think it should be Mr Deputy Speaker, shouldn't it? I'm very sorry, Mr Deputy Speaker. Labor will not support the expansion of the cashless debit card and this form of income management to new communities unless the community wants the card and there is informed community consent. I want to really emphasise that just for a moment. Labor does not believe that parliaments or governments should stand in the way of communities who are properly consulted and give informed community consent if they want the card. That is not our role. In the Bundaberg-Hervey Bay, where the rollout of the cashless debit card is only partially implemented, Labor will stop this rollout and take a case management approach to putting in place alternative support for people already on the card and investing in support services and programs that work if we are afforded government. In Ceduna, the East Kimberley and the Goldfields, where the rollout of the cashless debit card is complete, Labor will work with local communities to establish whether there is ongoing community consent. Where necessary, Labor will work with communities on alternative supports and programs, acknowledging that there are serious and complex social issues that will require commitment, time and resources to address. At all times, Labor will consult properly with the local community, and we acknowledge that this will take some time. Labor will take an evidence-based approach to policy and to income management. We will not demonise social security recipients like this government. I re-emphasise, Mr Deputy Speaker, that we will seek to move an amendment in the other place that will give the capacity for people to come off the card in certain circumstances that I have outlined. If those circumstances are met, there will be a local community panel in place that can facilitate a person coming off the card, and where there is not a panel in place, it will be done through the Department of Social Security. That is, in essence, the amendment that we will move in the upper house. I do hope it is successful. We very much recognise in Ceduna, East Kimberley and the Goldfields, where the rollout of the cashless card is complete, it will be extremely disruptive to cease those trials now, and given the timing of the proposed coming election and the uncertainty around that, we believe we are taking the responsible approach of continuing those trials for a set period of time, with hopefully, if the Senate amendment is successful, giving people who do not need to be on the card the capacity to come off the card.
I thank the honourable member for Barton. The question is that this bill be now read a second time.
I need to move an amendment circulated in my name.
Is the amendment seconded?
I second the amendment.
Thank the honourable member for Franklin. The original question was that this bill be now read a second time. To this, the honourable member for Barton has moved as an amendment that all words after that be omitted with a view to substituting other words. If it suits the House, I will state the question in the form that the amendment be agreed to. The question now is that the amendment be agreed to, and I call the honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I rise to speak on behalf of the Honourable Paul Fletcher MP, the Minister for Social Services. Deputy Speaker, this bill extends the cashless debit card program for a further year in the first three sites of Ceduna, the East Kimberley and the Goldfields, under the Social Security Administration Act 1999. This will allow the cashless debit card trial to operate in all sites until 30th of June 2020, and the bill will also extend income management in Cape York for a further year up to 30th of June 2020. These measures aim to reduce the devastating effects of alcohol, drug and gambling abuse, and the evidence shows that it is working with reductions across the board. The continuation of the cashless debit card and Cape York income management demonstrates the Morrison government's commitment to providing a sustainable social welfare safety net, reducing social harm in areas with high levels of welfare dependency, and supporting vulnerable people, families and communities. I'd like to thank all those who have contributed to the debate, and I see the member for Grey in the chamber, who's been an advocate and a strong supporter for the trial site in Ceduna, and I thank you.
I thank the honourable Minister. The question now is that the amendment be agreed to. All of those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the noes have it. The question now is that this bill be now read a second time. All of those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the law relating to social security and for related purposes.
Is leave granted for the third reading to be moved? Okay.
Leave is granted.
I've received a message from His Excellency the Governor-General recommending, in accordance with Section 56 of the Constitution, an appropriation for the purposes of this bill. Is leave granted? Yes.
Leave is granted.
I thank the honourable member for Franklin, and I call the honourable Minister.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I move that this bill be now read a third time.
I'll put the question. All of those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Clerk.
Third reading. A bill for an act to amend the law relating to social security and for related purposes.